Good evening and good morning, everyone present here in Facebook and YouTube Live. This is Rudranarayan Das. Take this privilege to warmly welcome you all to World Human Sciences and Management Conference 2022. Invitations to global dialogue on agnotological context, disciplinary practices of social sciences and policy frames. An initiative towards rethink times, and rethink episteme. Distinguished participants, partakers, this is a glorious moment to extend my warm wishes on behalf of Center for ADIVASI Research and Development. As this international conference is built with the intake of active and interactive learning and discussion organized by Center for ADIVASI Research and Development in collaboration with Indian Institute of Management, Sambalpur, Central University of Odisha, and Ravenshaw University. On behalf of Center for ADIVASI Research and Development, I want to convey my heartfelt gratitude to our patrons, Professor Sanjay Naik, Vice Chancellor, Ravenshaw University, Professor Mahadev Joyswal, Director, Indian Institute of Management, Sambalpur, and Professor Sarath Kumar Palita, Vice Chancellor, Central University of Odisha. The content of this largest virtual conference are eminent Indian historian, Professor Chandi Prasad Nanda, and eminent policy activist, writer, and philanthropist, Mr. Charudat Panigrahi. Ladies and gentlemen, the main outcome of this conference is to come up with national and international framework for the education system in future. The crux of this conference will be the use of digital technology such as artificial intelligence, augmented reality, and virtual reality that is being increasingly adopted after the outbreak of COVID pandemic. We hope this conference would help students, faculty, researchers, and all to expand their mental heroism and to help the education system to adopt the best in future. Dear friend, as you know that our Center for Adivasi Research and Development is a leading research-oriented institution promoting ethnographic, empirical, and evidence-based research for engaging and addressing the challenges that 21st century globe is facing today. Dear friends, a prime agenda of this institution is to come up with potential policy solutions for social change while believing in the idea of debate, dialogue, and discussion. The institution focuses on marginalized communities and works for their livelihood to protect their nature, culture, language, and identity in particular. The age of modernity has witnessed that change is the only constant phenomena for society purpose to enhance knowledge. Our information work for them is methodical and avoid paradoxically framework which is neglected so many centuries from theory to become practice. Our center sincerely believe in the concept of social marketing, which is seriously looking for non-profit marketing and builds new social entrepreneurship for check and balance mechanism to glorify generations to come. Center for Adivasi Research and Development come to serve with the holistic approach of critical thinking in education to fill the gaps and plan accordingly for the voiceless communities. Ladies and gentlemen, in today's evening in India, we have a very tremendous. It gives me tremendous contentment to introduce the most esteemed personality, a young philosopher from Italy, Professor Gianluigi Segalerba. Professor Segalerba, born in Genoa, Italy, graduated in philosophy at the University of Pisa in 1991 and obtained his PhD in philosophy at the University of Pisa in 1998. He was also a visiting scholar at the University of Tübingen of Vienna and also a cultural analyst at the University of Vienna. So welcome Professor Gianluigi to World Human Sciences and Management Conference. Your topic is suggested by you is liberalism, autonomy, diversity, and education, which will be definitely be a eye-opening session for all of us. The hundreds of people are watching us in Facebook and YouTube Live, and I really thank our director, Dr. Bikram Kesari Jena, for inviting such a wonderful personality like you to share your ideas on a particular field of liberalism, autonomy, and diversity, also in education. Welcome again. And with this note, I'd like to stop here and invite you to start your talk. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much. I hope I am audible. Is everything functioning? Can you hear me, or are there problems? Can you hear me? Thank you very much.
Please,
Well, I thank you, of course, and all the members of the organization or the audience for your invitation. I would like to see whether I can share my PowerPoint. I do not see.
please, yeah.
Yes, but let's see whether perhaps here. I do not know how to do because I. Oops. Well. I do not see how to connect with, let's see, perhaps yes. Yes, okay, it should function now. Can you see the PowerPoint now?
No, please open it, sir. It's in the front surface of your computer. Please open the
Yes,
PowerPoint.
yeah, I have made it, but well, it does it not function because I have made the procedure. Can you see anything? It should appear.
No, not it, sir. It's only showing your computer screen of the particular file that liberalism. Yeah, please open it, sir.
Yes, I have made it.
Not it, sir. No, it is not showing it.
Not yet. I have to see how can I do it. Because
Asking other Dr. Jena, can you see it from your device?
No. Sir, please click double click in your PPT. Then
yes,
it will open, I think.
Doesn't I have made it because really now.
No. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Please.
Yes.
Yeah. Now it's visible.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I thank you very much. Okay, we can begin. I thank you very much. Here are only the title and the theme. Good evening, of course, and I thank you very much for the invitation. A couple of perhaps of technical instruction. Of course, everything is at disposal. That is, if you are interested in the PowerPoint, I can send you to the address, to email address, or to the platform you can communicate me. And I am working on a draft corresponding to the PowerPoint, and I hope I will end the draft, the works for the draft over the next days. As regards the structure of the PowerPoint, the pages of the PowerPoint which have design are quotations of students, of scholars, of researchers, whereas all the pages of the PowerPoint without design are my notes. So you can distinguish immediately whether it is my notes or whether it is the quotations of persons. And so as a short presentation of the principal aim, the main aim which we will be seeing during my exposition, I would like to begin. So I would like to take into account some positions regarding the autonomy of the individual, the relationships between autonomy and education, and the presence or absence of a duty from the state as regards the promotion of autonomy. The general subject I would like to deal with is the significance and the worth of the concept of individual autonomy, at least some aspect of it. Autonomy will be interpreted as the capacity of self-direction of one's own life, opposed to external direction, and as the rational self-examination. Autonomy in general is the development of reflective capacities implying examination of traditional values. Connected to this theme is the debate of the existence of a right and even of a duty from the state in defending and in promoting autonomy of the citizens, of the individuals. The corresponding question is whether the state has the right to defend autonomy of the individuals in relation, for instance, to the group to which they belong, and whether the state has the duty to intervene for the promotion of the autonomy of individuals against the groups to which individuals belong. The subject of education of children in particular is strongly connected to the mentioned themes that we will see during this exposition. The difference or even the promotion of autonomy of the individuals from the state can collide in case of the question of the public education of the children with the right of the parents to choose for their children a determined way of education and determined way of living. Some elements taken from the legal space in the couches of common law could help to bring forward the discussion, as we will see. And my analysis will moreover deal with concepts like the possibility of the presence of a value pluralism in society and the compatibility between freedom and multiculturalism. Furthermore, I shall examine the question whether the educational system must reckon with the presence of different cultures in society or whether the educational system ought to be uniform for all children. And so here are some examples of the text which I will be speaking of during my exposition. It is in order to offer a description of different interpretation proposed on these themes, I shall begin my analysis on the debate regarding the sentence of the US Supreme Court, Wisconsin versus Yoder. In order to investigate on this debate, I shall take into account, for instance, the position of Joel Feinberg, The Child's Right to an Open Future, of Amy Gutman, Children, Paternalism and Education, of Richard Erneson and Ian Shapiro, Democratic Autonomy and Religious Freedom, a critic of Wisconsin versus Yoder, and of William Galston, Diversity, Toleration and Deliberative Democracy, Religious Minorities and Public Schooling, and the book Liberal Pluralism. Now, in order to set the questions, or to put the questions, the principal questions on the exposition, the principal question is, what is the aim of education? And we will see through some texts that the answers can be very different from each other. That is, there is no agreement in general as regards the aim of education of children and of citizens, of course. And well, education has a plurality of values, we will see. The connected questions are, what does education mean? What is the aim of education? Is civic education or not? And as regards the kinds of education, the public education, we can have public education, we can have private education. We can have public education up to which year of age? 14, 16, 18, for instance. And we will see that this is an important element of the debate. And then the connection with the significance of education. And as regards the duties of the state, of the country, of the government, we will confronted with the following questions. For instance, should the state pose only minimalistic levels of education? Or should the state pose greater levels of education than those present in an exclusively minimalistic perspective? And how are the budget problems? And as regards to liberalism, which is one of the terms of the title of my exposition, what does liberalism mean? No relation, there is no relation here with neoliberalism and with the perspective of neoliberalism. In this constant, liberalism means theory of fundamental freedoms to be acknowledged, promoted, and protected by governments and states. And how is liberalism connected to the kind of education which to have? There are some possible meanings and interpretation of liberalism which we will meet during the exposition. That is, one is liberalism's autonomy of education, autonomy of the person, of the individuals, and promotion through the state of the autonomy of individuals. Another significance, sense which we will find during within this exposition is liberalism as diversity. That is, liberalism is tendentially toleration of the different groups and the state has no right, or at least has a few rights to mix in the life of, and in the life and in the values of the different groups of a country. Liberalism of tolerance, and liberalism as protection of rights. And we will see that these questions are non-neutral, are absolutely non-neutral as regards the order of a society, the organization of a society. On the contrary, we can see that depending on the choice made about the significance of liberalism, very different models of society and of education derive. That is, the decision on the meaning of liberalism is decisive, is relevant to the structure of the society which we can have and which we are going to promote and to further. So yeah, can I spring, because these are, so to speak, repetitions and deepening of the main questions. As regards the persons, we are the scholars, the researchers and the professors, academicians, which we are going to know, to meet during the discussion. There are many. I have chosen only some of them, and I can present you here in a paar lines. One is Richard Arneson, who is the co-author with Jan Shapiro of an important article regarding education and the aims of education and the duties of the relatives, the rights of the children, and the concept of the citizenship. He teaches at the University of San Diego, California. Another person is, I can spring over the next two, is William Gelston, which is the fourth one, William Gelston, who teaches at the Brookings institutions. He was formerly professor at the School of Public Policy at the University of Maryland. His works are Liberal Purposes, Goods, Virtues, and Diversity in the Liberal State, Cambridge, 1991, and Liberal Pluralism, the implications of value pluralism for political theory and practice. And this one is the book, the work of William Gelston, with which we will be acquainted during the discussion, at least with some aspects of it, because it is a very rich book with many concepts. And of course, I was compelled to choose only some of them. Further person, as the already quoted Amy Gutman, she was for many years president of the University of Pennsylvania. Now in 2022, she was nominated ambassador to Germany. Her works are principal works, of course, Democratic Education, Princeton, 1987, and the article Children, Paternalism and Education, a Liberal Argument in Philosophy and Public Affairs, summer 1980. And this article is the work of Amy Gutman, which I will be going to analyze with in a detailed way. The last one, there is also Joseph Russ, of course, teaching law at the he died this year in May, more or less 1 month ago. He taught law for many years at the Columbia University Law School and the King's College London. And he formerly taught philosophy of law at the University of Oxford. And the work, his main works are The Authority of Law, Oxford, 1979, and The Morality of Freedom, Oxford, 1986. This one is the work regarding autonomy. It has a chapter regarding autonomy, which I will perhaps quote at the end of the exposition if the time will not be already over. It is very interesting as regards the possible definition of autonomy and the value of autonomy for individuals and for citizens. Also as regards the possible contrast between autonomy of individuals and the culture of determined groups. And the last one is Jan Shapiro, who worked very much with Richard Arneson, whom I presented before. He was the first one. He is professor of political science at Yale University. His works are, as editors, Democracy's Place, and will chemical ethnicity and group rights and the real world of democratic theory. Now, in order to give some technical information about the question, the problem from which everything began in the debate, in the American debate, Anglo-American debate, there are two questions which two notions which we have to take present. That is, everything was originated by a I have some. Are there problems? I have so well. I go forward. Everything came about because of a sentence of the U.S. Supreme Court, which I am going to describe. Two notions which we have to hold present or before our eyes is the first one is the old order Amish, and we will see how this is relevant. The Amish are a group, formerly the old order Amish, which is living in different states of the United States, in particular in this case in Wisconsin. They are a group of traditional Anabaptist Christian church fellowships with Swiss, German, and Alsatian origins. They live rather isolated from the other groups of the United States, and they do not participate to the public life of the United States. They are closely related to Mennonite churches and other Anabaptist denominations. The Amish are known for simple living, plain dress, Christian pacifism, and slowness to adopt many conveniences of modern technology, with a view neither to interrupt family time nor replace face-to-face conversations whenever possible, and a view to maintain self-sufficiency, isolation from the public life of the United States. The Amish value rural life, manual labor, humility, and Gelassenite, submission to God's will, all under the auspices of living what they interpret to be God's work. And we will see why this group is so relevant to the discussion. The second notion, which we will see quoted very many times during the discussion, is the First Amendment of the US Constitution, in particular the first paragraph, that is, that the Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. The relevant paragraph for us is the first one, that is, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And we'll see that this is particularly relevant to the discussion which we are going to cope with. And now coming to the problem, to the question which originated the debate in the Anglo-American discussion on education, citizenship, duties of the citizenship, rights of children, rights of relatives, of parents, and rights of groups, and contrast between groups and individuals. The question is this: as is the famous Yoda sentence of the Supreme Court of the United States, which was pronounced in 1972. In spite of the fact that the sentence only regards a particular case, the presence or the absence of the right possessed by an Amish community to withdraw their children from the obligatory school in Wisconsin at age 14 instead as at age 16, the new law of Wisconsin at that time foresaw that the obligatory period of school had to be extended up to 16 years, the discussion and analysis of this sentence in different thinkers and the different position adopted by these thinkers on this sentence can furnish us many elements for reflection on the aim of education, in particular on the contents of education, and on the very meaning of citizenship. The case is this, very synthetically. Of course, I can give you the whole sentence of the Supreme Court, but very synthetically is this. Three Amish students from three different families were withdrawn from school in New Glarus, Wisconsin. The name of the school was New Glarus High School. after the end of the 8th grade because of the religious belief of their parents. The three families were represented by Jonas Yoder, one of the fathers involved in the lawsuit. The families lost the case in the Greene County Court, but the Wisconsin Supreme Court decided then in favor of Yoder. That is, that the families had the right to withdraw the children, their own children, after only 8 years of school, instead after the 10 compulsory years of school. The Supreme Court of Wisconsin motivated its decision on the basis of the fact that the compulsory school attendance would violate the rights of the parents under the Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment. And the Wisconsin Board of Schools appealed to the United States Supreme Court. So we see why I quoted the First Amendment, and on the one hand, and on the other hand, I nominated the Amish group. That is, the question is, the Amish said 10 years of compulsory school violate the free exercise for our children of the First Amendment, the free exercise of religion, which is contained in the First Amendment. And the Wisconsin Supreme Court gave a right to them. And the Amish church standard, higher education was considered as being unnecessary for the way of life Amish children were destined to, and as endangering the salvation of Amish children. The families appealed, therefore, for exemption for compulsory education. And this then was the decision of the Supreme Court of the United States, because the Wisconsin Board of Schools appealed then against the decision of the Wisconsin Supreme Court to the Supreme Court of the United States. And the Supreme Court decided 6-1 or 6-0 in the following way. The Supreme Court of the United States found that Amish children might not be placed under compulsory education after 8th grade. The parents' fundamental right to freedom of religion was considered as outweighing the state's interest in educating children. That is, the parents and the group of Amish have the right to say, we are not going to follow and to meet the law of Wisconsin, because the free exercise of religion is stronger than the law of Wisconsin. And so in order to give some more information about the decision of the Supreme Court held as follows. States cannot force individuals to attend school when it infringes on their First Amendment rights. In this case, the state of Wisconsin interfered with the practice of a legitimate religious belief. 2, not all beliefs rise to the demands of the religious clause of the First Amendment. There needs to be evidence of true and objective religious practices instead of an individual making his or her standards on such matters. The Amish way of life is one of deep religious convictions that stems from the Bible. It is determined by their religions, which involves the rejection of worldly goods and their living in the biblical simplicity. The modern compulsory secondary education is in sharp conflict with their way of life. Third, with respect to the state of Wisconsin's argument that additional modern education beyond 8th grade is necessary to prepare citizens to participate effectively and productively in America's political system, the court disagreed. It is argued that the state provided no evidence showing any great benefit to having 2 extra years in the public schools. Furthermore, the court contended that the Amish community was a very successful social unit in American society, a self-sufficient, law-abiding member of society which paid all of the required taxes and rejected any type of public welfare. The Amish children, upon leaving the public school system, continued their education in the form of vocational training. Now, I can so read also this page and then make a spring to the first commentators of the sentence. The court found no evidence that by leaving the Amish community without 2 additional years of schooling, young Amish children would become burdens on society. To the contrary, the court argued that they had good vocational background to rely upon. It was the state's mistaken assumption that Amish children were ignorant. Compulsory education after elementary school was a recent movement that developed in the early 20th century in order to prevent child labor and keep children of certain ages in school. The state of Wisconsin's arguments about compelling the school attendance were therefore less substantial. And now you can, I have a section which goes a little bit deeper into the different motivations of the Supreme Court and of the dissent of Judge Douglas. We can discuss thereafter it, but now I would like to introduce you into the debate following into this sentence, because the debate has, so to speak, transcended then the real range and width of this sentence and became a sort of debate regarding aims of education, rights of children, rights of parents, rights of groups, cultural groups, and interpretation of the First Amendment of the US Constitution. Now, of course, it is an open question who is right. There are arguments pro and there are arguments against the decision of the US Supreme Court. And in general, there are, as we will see, very different interpretations of what education is, what education should be, and what is the principal, the main aim of the principal social goods of a society, whether it is education or something else. And what thereafter then are the requirements to be and to become a good citizen, And so we will see that this debate transcends actually the legal question posed to the US Supreme Court and goes towards a general interpretation of the concept of education. And we will see now 3 main positions regarding this debate. The first position which I would like to offer you is this of Amy Gutmann. I said Amy Gutmann was for many years the president of the University of Pennsylvania. Before she was professor, of course. And now she has been appointed to ambassador of the United States to Germany. And the positions of Amy Gutmann, of which I will present you, some texts, some passages, can be synthesized in the following points. She is for the development of autonomy of the children. And as regards the right of parents, which she defines as paternalism of parents, these rights of parents of their children is subdued to letting children acquainted with a plurality of life perspectives and with a plurality of social goods. It is not a power without determination. That is, if there are rights of parents of the children, these rights are only functional to the development of the perspectives of the children. That is, it is not an absolute power, but it is a power only directed to the enlargement of perspectives and to the richness of education of the children. There is, for Amy Gutmann, a precise right of children to education and a precise rights of children to socialization, to be socialized. These children may not be separated in a group from the other groups of the society. They should become the possibility of enjoying a socialization and a communication with the other groups of the society, in particular with the groups of the United States, but this, of course, can be extended to the concept of socialization and education of children in general, not depending, of course, on a particular country. The context of education, in opinion of Amy Gutmann, depends on what is adequate to live a full life within the society. That is, education should enable the children and the individuals to participate in the life of the society. The right of children to education is a precondition to becoming a rational human being and a full citizen of a liberal democratic society. And there is, on the contrary, for Amy Gutmann, a precise incapability of children to exercise their own civil and political rights in absence of a formal education. That is, either there is education and the children will become full citizens, or if there is no education, on an absence of education, of a diminution of this education, the formal education in schools, and eventually also in the university, then there will be damages for the civil and political rights of the citizens. That is, the education is decisive in order to have an expression and a full use of civil and political rights. And the article of Amy Gutmann as a beginning point, the discussion whether paternalism from parents towards their children can be allowed or not. The presence of paternalism means that parents may have a role in the development of their children. Absence of paternalism means that parents do not have any permission to interfere with the life of their children. The principles of Gutmann are: there are primary goods, education is a primary good, these primary goods are not expendable, and civic education is one of the primary goods. And the life dimension of the children may not be limited to the community or to the family. A plurality of models to be acquainted with is indispensable. Therefore, a child and an individual in general cannot be held separated into the family, into a group. Also, if this group is very large, the child must be socialized. And education means, among other things, socialization of children and of the individuals. Gutmann's position are clearly in favor of civic education, of development of autonomy in children, and of a system of schooling favoring the birth of critical thinking. There is no point in speaking of an actual freedom if systems of education are not backed up, which lead to the development of autonomy in children. Gutmann thinks that parents may exercise a kind of paternalism in relation to their own children, but this means that parents have power over children. The point is that children are to be considered as individuals not yet being able to take all decisions on their future. A kind of paternalism cannot be avoided as regards the future of the children, but notwithstanding, to acknowledge to the parents the power of their children does not mean that parents can address children to what the parents want. Paternalism ought to be exercised so that parents let children be acquainted with a plurality of goods and with a plurality of possibilities. Paternalism or power over children is subdue to the parents' duty of offering children a plurality of life perspectives. It is not a power without further determination. It is functional to the development of children. This power may be exercised so only towards the development of a plurality of life perspective in the children. Now, coming to a quotation, we can read from her article the following sentences. To determine who ought to have educational power over children, I begin by looking for a standard of paternalism, a standard justifying interference with the child's freedom of action by reference to the child's present or future interests. I assume that the liberal justification of paternalism toward children must rest upon an equal consideration of the interests of children as potentially rational beings capable of choosing freely among a range of competing conceptions of the good life and of intelligently governing themselves in a democratic society. So Gutmann, as we can see, underlines the importance of goods like a kind of education enabling individuals to choose between available opportunities and to become informed citizens. Without being informed citizens, individuals are deprived of orientation in the world in which they live. Parents' power may be used only to promote the development and the opening of perspectives for children. Paternalism of parents is allowed by Gutmann because children cannot have reached the maturity necessary for taking by themselves the decisions regarding their own lives. Anyway, primary goods are the point of orientation of the action of the parents. Paternalism is functional to the development of children. It is not an absolute value. To endow children with primary goods is the aim to which the concession of paternalism is directed. And reading another quotation, Amy Gatman says, the most obvious primary goods we as rational persons would want provided to us as children are adequate nutrition, healthcare, housing, familiar affection, and an education adequate to choosing among available economic and social opportunities and to becoming informed democratic citizens. Yet, from the point of view of some citizens within our society, even this short list is controversial. Many Jehovah's Witnesses and Christian scientists do not think that their children should be forced to take certain medicines or undergo certain medical treatments that are necessary to good health and normal physiological development, and sometimes to life itself. The old order Amish do not believe that formal secondary education is primary good in our society, but these examples need not upset the plausibility of a primary good standard of paternalism applied to children. And she continues, primary goods justifiably guide paternalistic intervention only if certain conditions hold. The subject's reason or will must be too weak to guide his actions, or evidently must have failed to do so. And we must be incapable of knowing enough about the subject's most settled aims and preferences. We know that children, at least below a certain age, lack adequate reason to make many important decisions for themselves, and we cannot take the aims or preferences to be settled. End of the quotation, and she then will go with a question regarding familiar environment. The familiar environment, in her opinion, proves to be inferior in comparison to the society as regards the opening of perspective. She says, rarely, if ever, does a family furnish its children with as broad a range of resources and opportunities to choose among free and adequate adult lives as does a wider society. While parents often do give their children some of the essential goods of life, they still have a duty to permit, if not to prepare, their children to choose among a range of conceptions of the good life that differ substantially from those held by the family. As citizens of a society offering a broad range of choices to its adult members, parents have an obligation to allow their children to be exposed to the choices available in their extra-familiar society. So, end of the quotation, she said the society presents a broader range of resources. Parents, in her opinion, have a duty to let children free to choose other ways of life. That is, parents do not have the right to close children in a community, holding children far from alternative way of life. Children ought to be put in contact with other ways of life. There is a precise obligation from the parents to do so. And Gottman underlines the insufficiency of the family environment in comparison to the society. A family cannot offer the plurality of perspectives, for instance, of one's own realization in life, which a society can give. Parents have the duty to introduce their children to the plurality represented by the society. That is, they may not hold children away from the society. Gottman, therefore, is against the closing of children to the limitations of the family. The introduction of children to society is a precise obligation of the parents. Therefore, a community may not, no matter how great the community is, close its members to the community itself. Another quotation, if my argument, she says, if my argument so far is correct, it will not suffice to claim that the Amish community has the right to impose its standard upon Amish children. Even if the Amish community were an economically and politically self-sufficient unit within our society, the Amish would still have a duty to expose their children to a greater range of choice than they now do. If they were self-sufficient enough, it might be the case that no state surrounding the Amish community would have a clear right to intervene in the education of Amish children so as to enforce the duty of Amish parents. The parental duty, nonetheless, would remain, of course. The Wisconsin Amish today are not a self-sufficient community, nor do they provide their children with as broad a range of choices among good lives as the larger society does. So, end of the quotation, you can see the parental duty of introducing children, says she, into society existing outside a precise community, holds no matter how great and how strong the community is. The parental duty does remain, independently of the self-sufficiency or not of the Amish community. Parents' right To impose a particular kind of education does not depend on the self-sufficiency of the community to which parents and children belong. Even though the community were self-sufficient, parents would have nonetheless the duty to let children be acquainted with a plurality of realizations in life. Children have the right to a realization independently of the dimension of the community to which they belong. Parents may not decide the future realization of children and let them be far from every other kind of realization. Parents do not have this kind of right. Gutmann is of the opinion that the precise right of the children to receive an education, introducing them into the society, a right to be socialized, exists. Children have the right to be enabled to choose among different conceptions of the good. She says, quotation, we must briefly examine the meaning of a child's right to education within a liberal society. The children have rights in virtue of their basic needs and interests as future adult citizens. One of those rights will be a right to education, or what some theorists have called a right to socialization. The content of children's right to education will depend upon what is adequate for living a full life within their society, for being capable of choosing among available conceptions of the good and of participating intelligently in democratic politics if they so choose. I have no doubt that this criteria imposes substantially greater obligations upon us than we fulfill by our current educational and other related practices. But beyond this point, education ceases to be a right, even if it remains an important human good. On this understanding, a child's right to compulsory education is a precondition to becoming a rational human being and a full citizen of a liberal democratic society. Without any formal schooling, children will be incapable of intelligently exercising their civil or political rights within our society. The assertion on the part of the parents of an unconstrained right of free exercise therefore entails the assertion of a right to deprive their children of two fundamental goods for which a liberal democratic state exists: the making of an informed choice among components of the good life and participation in meaningful democratic self-government. Excuse me, I see. The point is, the right to a compulsory education is a precondition for being able to become a rational being and a full citizen. Without this condition, there is no possibility of a correct formation of individuals. It is essential to define the right of children to education. Rights belong to children because of their needs and interests as future citizens. Rights derive from the needs and from the interests that children will have as future adult citizens. Interests imply rights. In particular, the right of a child to education is connected to the capability for a full life in the society, to the capability of choice among different goods, and to the participation to the social life. The fundamental point is that without schooling, children will suffer a diminution in their own development or will not reach the due development. Children without education cannot reach the level in which, as adults, they exercise in the due way their civil and political rights. Freedom cannot be completed without education. Amy Goodman, last quotation, without education, liberal freedoms lose a great deal, even if not all of their value, she says. End of the quotation. There is no liberal freedom in case there is no education. Socially, a person without education is without orientation. Parents must supply children with a plurality of possibilities, that is, with a plurality of possible goods in life. This implies, among other things, that parents do not have the right to retire children from the environment in which they could have different choices. In spite of the fact that parents have a power over children, this power does not imply that parents may direct children to a determined good or that they may close them the plurality of life perspectives. They ought to make their children acquainted with a plurality of goods. It is a principle, of Gutmann that individuals have a right to choose as adults their future and that this presupposes they be acquainted with a plurality of choices. Without being acquainted with a plurality of choices, they do not have really a free choice. Without a formal schooling, children will not be able to become mature citizens. This is the center of the discourse. Hence, the parents may not deprive their children of a formal education. Without this education, children will be deprived of their own realization. children will be deprived of the possibility of choice and of active participation. These are the main point of Gutmann. And now I would like to present you the position of Ernst and Shapiro, who are two authors who composed this common article about the taking they begin with the sentence of a US Supreme Court and evilly criticizing this sentence. And so I shall now deal with, in my opinion, principal reflections contained in Ernst and Shapiro's article. The fundamental point in Ernst and Shapiro's meditation is, in my opinion, that children are not the property of their parents. They are not the property of their parents. And insofar they criticized the US Supreme Court because the US Supreme Court treated the children as if they were property of their parents. Throughout the whole article of Ernst and Shapiro, we can see that the two authors refuse any conception of patriarchalism as principle holding between children and parents. This is the main assumption. Children are not property. Therefore, children may not be used for the aim of the parents. In particular, as we shall see, children may not be used in order to ensure the survival of a religious community. As children live in the relation of trusteeship with their parents, they have the right of being endowed with an education aiming at least at a certain degree of autonomy. If children are not educated to autonomy, they are not free. The main position in the article are the following ones. There are precise limitations to the authority of parents. The relationships between parents and children ought to be considered as trusteeship. Trusteeship excludes that children are property of their parents. The patriarchal assumption that the child is chattel of his parents is refused. The right of children to education trumps the right of the Amish community to preserve the life of their community. Education ought to prepare children and pupils for a life in the world generally, not for a life in a particular community to the exclusion of all the other forms of life. Education ought to be education to citizenship. Education ought to enable pupils to participate in the public life if they want to. Excuse me. The state has precise duties as regards education. The state may not be satisfied with the minimum feasible. The fundamental point is that education is a value as such. Without education, there is no mature citizenship. The point, the element distinguishing the position of Ernst and Shapiro consists in their regarding civic education as the instrument for reaching a complete citizenship and a complete development of mind. Participation in the public sphere is a reasonable obligation. Ernst and Shapiro do not show any indifference whatsoever in relation to participation or not participation in voting. They plead for an active model of citizenship, for a kind of civic republicanism. As a postulate holds that participation to the public life is better than withdrawal. Group rights may not have the upper hand on individual rights. The conception that group rights can overtake the individual right to education cannot be accepted. Education is education for autonomy, and then so there should be a maximization of options for the children and for the individuals and the development of critical reason through education. Now, in order to read something of the position of Ernst and Shapiro, unfortunately, I will limit the intervention because I see that the clock is running and I am fast over with the time. So Ernst and Shapiro says, in this chapter, that is in the article, we take up a small piece of the newly discovered terrain. We explore the limits of parents' authority in the education of children who have been committed to their charge. Our use of this formulation, rather than parents' authority over their children, prefigures one of the central claims we seek to defend and employ, that the relationship between parents and children is best thought as one of trusteeship. Children are in no sense the property of their parents. Although most people will find the claim thus stated unexceptionable, and few would go so far as to describe their children as their property, many of the conviction to which people find themselves drawn in thinking about the authority of parents over children nevertheless reflect the archaic idea that the child is a chattel of the parent, which once went hand in hand with the patriarchal idea that the wife is the chattel of the husband. End of the quotation. And these passages already furnishes important elements as regards the strategy of Ernst and Shapiro. That is, we can see there are limits to the parents' authority in relation to the children. Children are no possession of parents. The relation between parents and children is a relation of trusteeship, and patriarchalism, any form of patriarchalism, is refused. Anderson Shapiro speak of trusteeship in order to define the correct relationship between parents and children. This relation is not a relation of property. In order to read another passage, another quotation, they say the free exercise interests in question were the interests of the Amish parents in practicing their religion in their traditional way, but the state's expressed interest concerned the education of Amish children. On the face of it, there was a gap between the right claimed by the parents having to do with their practice of religion and the claims of the state having to do with the children's education. They individuate, end of the quotation, individuate the existence of a contrast between the claim of the state for children's education, the claims of the parents consisting in the practice and the preservation of the practice of religion. They underline the contrast existing between the interest of the Amish community, which lies in the practice of the religion and the possibility of the preservation of the life and continuity of the community, and the interest of the state, which consists in the education of the children, no matter which consequences this can have for the survival of the life of the Amish community. The contrast lies, among other things, in the fact that Amish considers a higher degree of education a danger, since the greater the education, the greater the probability is that children of the community abandon the community of the Amish. And Anderson Shapiro quotes this quotation, although the Amish believe that vow or baptism must be taken voluntarily by a mature person, they go to great lengths in designing their system of education and acculturation to ensure that Amish children will take the vow and join the church. Herein lies the source of the half-century of conflict between the Amish and secular educational authorities, which culminated in the Yoder decision. The Amish educational system is designed to prepare children for life in the Amish community, not the outside world. To this end, the Amish try to shield children from the secular world, and they actively discourage critical questioning of Amish value and beliefs. They are particularly opposed to high school education, which they see as threatening to the entire way of life. By age 14, the Amish child knows everything necessary to live successfully in the Amish community. As a result, the Amish oppose further schooling, preferring on-the-job vocational training than will lead children to the community. As we can see, end of the quotation, the school education enlarges interest. Therefore, it is seen as an enemy for the stability and preservation of the community. Our education system is sought out so that children do not live and cannot leave the community. There is no plurality of values, there is no critical thinking. It is clear that if mixing with the common way of life is considered to be a danger for the individual salvation, the community will do everything in order that this mixing does not happen. In this sense, it could be said that the conflict between views is stronger than it can appear. We have, on the one hand, a community convinced that a determined way of life is necessary in order to reach the salvation, and on the other hand, we have a conception of the way of life as a choice between a plurality of realizations. It is a model of participation in the pluralism of social life. In this last way of thinking, different ways of life are admitted, and no specific kind of life is considered to bring to individual salvation. The point is that in the first way of thinking, the principal point is individual salvation, which can obtain only through a determined way of life, whereas in second way of thinking, the principal point is the condition for realization as a good citizen. I would like to, I make a spring, and I would like to quote a part of sentences of Anderson Shapiro regarding the sense of the education, that is, as they value the significance of education. And they say, quotation, we suppose that a significant aspect of citizenship includes the requirement that people have the capacity to vote in an informed way in elections that determine the membership of legislative assemblies. Hence, the content of the laws, as well as the identity of public officials and judges who execute and apply the law. To be able to participate competently in democratic decision-making, voters should have an adequate knowledge of contemporary science in its bearing on public issues, and understanding of modern world history, and particularly the history of democratic institutions and the culture of their own society, and critical thinking skills that include the ability to represent the situation of others in imagination, to intuit their experience, and sympathetically to analyze and assess their attitudes, principles, and policy arguments. Citizens should have the capacities to keep themselves briefed on current events relevant to governmental decisions to be made. In a diverse democracy composed of disparate creeds, faiths, races, worldviews, and concerns, arriving at a fair and reasonable decisions about public policy is a task of delicate and complex judgment. End of the quotation. And we can see their model of education aims at endowing children with a civic education. Children ought to receive an education enabling them to participate in the future in the life of the public sphere. Of course, individuals may, as adults, autonomously decide to not participate in the public life. One thing is anyway to be able to participate and to decide not to make use of this capability. Another thing is to be not able to participate in the public life since this capability has not been reached because of an insufficient education. And going forward, you see they consider as necessary in order to participate to successfully to the common life, to the public life, these knowledges, that is, for instance, knowledge of contemporary sciences as regard the connections between contemporary science and public issues, knowledge of modern world history, knowledge of the history of the democratic institutions, and knowledge of the culture of their own society. It is necessary from the side of the education to endow children in order that they can become mature citizens with a complex of knowledges which enrich the mind of the children. That is, the education, there is the necessity of a long period of education, and orientation is necessary in order to be able to efficaciously participate in the public life. A person without orientation is easy to be manipulated. Of course, this can be regarded as ideal conditions. Anyway, it is important that the duty of the state to provide this kind of education is affirmed. It is important that precise aims for the education be set. Moreover, voters ought to possess critical thinking skills in order to be able to represent to oneself the situation of other people, to be able to intuit the experience of other people, to analyze and to assess without prejudice the attitudes, the principles, and the policy arguments of other people. Furthermore, citizens should be able to inform themselves about the events that could be important for the decision of a government could take. The point of Anderson Shapiro consists in asserting that in a pluralistic society, to reach a decision requires a due preparation. This preparation can be obtained only through an adequate education, through a critical education. I think that I can perhaps make a spring because I see that the clock is going. And so, and the article of Anderson Shapiro is very long, of course. It would serve a deep analysis, but I would like to give you an example before the time is over of a different conception. Up to now, we have seen the position of Gutman and the position of Anderson Shapiro, which substantially criticize the US Supreme Court decision and say, no, education should be here. Children should be socialized. Education should be civic education, education to participation in the public life of the future citizens, and therefore education should contain a wide range of elements, history, political science, and so on and so forth, in order to endow the future citizens with a body of knowledge, enabling them to exercise, to fully exercise, to orientate themselves in the public life. And but these are not the only positions. We can see that, for instance, there is another position of a person I have mentioned to you before, and therewith I will conclude my intervention. The position of William Galston. Galston presents a completely different position because we can see, for instance, that common to Gutman and Anderson Shapiro is that there is, so to speak, a range of social goods, and education is the first one of the social goods which we can have in the life of the children and life of the adults, that is education as civic education and as preparation to the citizen life. Gaston is not of this conviction, is not of this idea, of this opinion. On the contrary, he says that there is not a rank for goods, for social goods. Education is a good, but is a social good, important, but there are other goods which are on the same level. And there is no first feature, there is no measure for goods. Social goods. Goods are qualitatively heterogeneous in relation to each other. There is no summum bonum, that is, there is no absolute, no greatest value for all individuals. There is no ordering among kind of goods, and there is no first virtue in the social institution. There are different goods and different virtues whose importance and relevance are not absolute. And therefore, he said that the importance and relevance of the different goods and of the different virtues can be measured not absolutely, but only with reference to the different circumstances. In particular, the state may only establish minimum standards of education, that is not so high standards of education as it is the question of for the measure for Amy Gutman and for Anderson and Shapiro. No, standards of education should be only minimum. The state might only establish a minimum content of education, and the state must pursue a politics of maximum feasible accommodation. That is, the state has no right and has no duty to intervene in the sphere of the different groups composing the society. And the fundamental idea of Galston is that the core commitments of the liberal democracy place limits on the measures the state may legitimately employ. The first quotation I like to refer to perfectly explains, in my opinion, the fundamental general position of Galston. He says, objective goods cannot be fully rank ordered. This is already a declaration, so to speak, because it is completely different from the position of Anderson Shapiro. Anderson Shapiro say education is the first virtue, is the first good, and without education there is no life of minds and no public life of the individuals. He says objective goods cannot be fully rank ordered. This means there is no common measure for all goods which are qualitatively heterogeneous. It means there is no summum bonum, that is the chief goods for all individuals. It means that there are no comprehensive lexical orderings among types of goods. It also means that there is no first virtue of social institution, but rather a range of public goods and virtues, the relative importance of which will depend on the circumstances. As we can see, there is not a rank for goods, there is no first virtue, there is no measure for goods. Goods are qualitatively heterogeneous in relation to each other, and there is no summum bonum, there is no absolute, no greatest value for all individuals. There is no ordering among kind of goods, there is no first virtue in the social institution, and there are different goods and different virtues whose importance and relevance are not absolute. That is, practically education has no right to be considered as the first value in the life of children and in the preparation as the basis of the public life. And so already on the basis of this quotation, we can see that we find ourselves in a completely different way of thinking in comparison with Ernest and Shapiro's. If in the view of Ernest and Shapiro's, the development reached through civic education does constitute an absolute value, Galston's position are undoubtedly oriented on the basis of the contents of the circumstances. Goods can have more value in a circumstance and less value in another circumstance. Moreover, there is no due ranking on the basis of which goods can be measured. With reference to the civic education, we can already see that civic education will not be considered by Galston as representing an absolute value. Galston's orientation originates in his interpretation of liberalism as diversity, which opposes the conception of liberalism as autonomy. If liberalism has been interpreted as a conception which promotes and how to promote the development of autonomy in the individuals, this is particularly evident in Ernest and Shapiro, Galston interprets liberalism as a conception which how to respect diversity and guarantee the condition for coexistence between the different communities living in a state. The state how not to promote autonomy in the individual, but content itself with a minimum feasible promoting the social peace between the different groups. Therefore, autonomy is not an absolute value. The state and system of education outweigh merit. Gaston expresses, for instance, the following observation on the sentence, which is the origin of the debate. Consider, quotation, consider finally the case of Wisconsin versus Yoda, decided by the Supreme Court. This case presented a clash between a Wisconsin state law, which required school attendance until age 16, and the old order Amish, who claimed that high school attendance would undermine the faith-based community life. The majority of court agreed with the Amish and denied that the state of Wisconsin had made a compelling case for intervening against their practices. However strong the state's interest in universal compulsory education, it is by no means absolute to the exclusion or subordination of all other interests. This case involves the fundamental interest of parents as contrasted with that of the state to guide the religious future education of their children. And he says further, from a liberal pluralist point of view, I argue, there are multiple types of legitimate decision making, and democracy is not trumps for all purposes. Another example, from a liberal pluralist point of view, public institutions must be cautious and restrained in their dealings with voluntary associations, and there is no presumption that the state may intervene in such associations because they conduct their internal affairs in ways that diverge from general public principles. So we have here a different conception of liberalism, and in order to give another example of Gelston's thought, he says, quotation, the relationship between voluntary association and publicly enforced civic norms has emerged as a key point of disagreement among contemporary liberals. Some argue that civic goods are important or fragile enough to warrant substantial state interference with civil associations. It is a mistake, they believe, to give anything like systematic deference to associational claims. I disagree. I begin with the intuition that free associations yields important human goods and that the state bears a burden of proof whenever it seeks to intervene. My accounts of value pluralism, expressive liberty, and political pluralism lend theoretical support to this intuition and help explain why we should not see state power as plenipotentiary. This end of the quotation. You can see here, this is a phrase, sentence, the state bears a burden of proof whenever it seeks to intervene. It is not that, as in Anderson Shapiro, the state proposed this kind of education, and therefore this kind of education should be affirmed for all pupils and for all children in order to have mature adults and mature citizens. He says, on the contrary, no, the state has the burden of proof. The state must prove, must demonstrate that it is necessary to do so. And though we have a complete different way of thinking about liberalism, intervention of state, education, and rights of the groups. And going further, in order to conclude, he says, first, in a liberal democracy, there is in principle a division of authority between parents and the state. The state has the right to establish certain minimum standards, such as the duty of parents to educate their children and to specify some minimum content of education wherever it may be conducted. But parents have a wide and protected range of choices as to how the duty to educate is to be discharged, suitably revised and extended. These considerations apply to the liberties of civil associations as well. Second, there are some things the liberal state may not do, even in the name of forming good citizens. The appeal to the requisite of civic education is powerful, but not always dispositive when opposed by claims based on the authority of parents or the liberties of individuals and associations. You see, here we have a complete different position from Anderson and Shapiro, because Anderson and Shapiro states that the state, the country, the government has to pose high standards in education, high standards education. We are seeking knowledge of history, of political science, of the society, of the other groups which compose the society, for instance. Gerson says on the contrary, no, the state has the right to establish minimum standards, minimum content of education, All the rest belongs to the parents, to the relatives, and the state has no right to interfere. That is a minimum state, so to speak, a minimum state activity. And so in order to find perhaps a last quotation, because I see that I am nearly over with the considered time. Yes, he says, for instance, also here about the general conception of liberalism. A liberal polity guided, as I believe it should be, by a commitment to moral and political pluralism will be parsimonious in specifying binding moral public principles and cautious about employing such principles to intervene in the internal affairs of civil associations. It will rather pursue a policy of maximum feasible accommodation, limited only by the core requirements of individual security and civic unity. That there are costs to such a polity cannot reasonably be denied. It will permit internal association practices, for example, patriarchal gender relations, of which many strongly disapprove. It will allow many associations to define their memberships in a way that may be seen as restraints on individual liberty, and it will, within limits, protect those whose words and way of life express deep disagreement within the regime in which they live. But unless liberty, individual and associational, is to be narrowed dramatically, this cost must be accepted. That is, you can see, he is ready to justify conception of patriarchalism, and he limits very, very much the power, the authority, and the right of the state to intervene in the associational group. That is ready to bear, to support a certain degree of, so to speak, authoritarianism of the groups on the members of the group, which is completely different from the position of Anderson, Shapiro, and also of Amy Gutmann, because they say clearly, no, education is the first value, and therefore all the rest must be sacrificed to the affirmation of education. In order to conclude, I would like to quote you a last quotation passage of Gaston on liberal autonomy, because here we can find the affirmation of different assertions, the statement of different kinds of liberalism, which was one of the questions which I mentioned at the beginning of this position. He says, liberal autonomy, I shall argue, is linked to an historical impulse often associated with the Enlightenment, namely liberation through reason from externally imposed authority. Within this context, reason is understood as a prime source of authority. Examined life is understood as superior to reliance on tradition or faith. Preference is given to self-direction of external determination, and appropriate relationships to conception of good or of value, and especially conception that constitute groups, are held to originate only through acts of conscious individual reflection on and commitment to such conceptions. So this is, in his opinion, one conception of liberalism. His conception is another one. He says, liberal diversity, by contrast, is linked to what I shall call the post-Reformation project, that is, to the effort to deal with the political consequences of religious differences in the wake of divisions within Christendom. That is, he is not for the model of liberalism as liberation of the individual from the groups, from the authoritarianism of groups. He is not for a conception of liberalism as a way of thinking which affirms the autonomy of the individuals, and the autonomy of individuals and all the education as preparation to being autonomous, an autonomous entity, is particularly to be seen both in Amy Gutmann and in Anderson and Shapiro. Liberalism as autonomy, education as preparation to autonomy, autonomy as the value for the individual, because only with autonomy can the individual participate in the public life. Only with the mental preparation and the, so to speak, on the endowment of knowledge. Now, is for liberal diversity. Liberal diversity is a way of interpretation of liberalism, which is completely different. It's a liberal diversity consists substantially in the toleration of different groups and in a politics of non-interference of the state in the inner life of the groups. Also, and even though this means that the individuals within the groups are subdued to some limitation of their own liberties. That is, it is a completely different conception from the conception of liberalism as autonomy and promotion of autonomy and of liberation from the groups. I see that the time is over, therefore I think that it is better that I cease here to speak in order to give you the word for the question. Of course, there are very many aspects of the question, both of liberalism and of education, not only regarding the sentence of the Supreme Court. The sentence is important, but it is only, so to speak, the origin of a general and more a larger debate on the education, on the aims of education on the one hand, and also on the rights of the individual in relation to eventually to the groups which the individual belong. That is, we have seen that the 2 points are: what is education? What should education aim at? And the answers are very different from each other, because Anderson and Shapiro say education should aim at the promotion of the autonomy, of the development of mind, and of the independence of the individuals. And on the other hand, Garrison say, no, well, education cannot be defined generally. Education is rather a thing of, is rather a matter of the group, of the culture, a cultural group to which the individuals belong. Therefore, there is no possibility of defining education once and for all. There is no possibility to define the aims of education in the whole society, but the solution to the question of what education is should be deferred and given to the different groups, cannot be decided once and for all. And at the same time, also liberalism and the role and the right of the state can have different interpretation as regards autonomy, education, and the value which are given to autonomy and to education. And well, of course, the discussion can be further deepened because there are very many materials. I'm not going now to mention Ratz because Ratz introduced us into a conception of autonomy as such, is for autonomy and for the promotion of autonomy, also if autonomy goes against the cultural groups to which an individual belongs. But I think it is perhaps better if I end here and give you the word for the questions. Of course, as I said, all the materials of my exposition are at disposal, and I am working on a draft which I hope to finish within the next weeks. Anyway, I thank you very much. Not to forget, of course, I thank you very much for your invitation and, of course, also for your gentle attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for your very nice and wonderful brief presentation. You are very intelligently speaking more than about 120 minutes. I would like to invite Dr. Nupur Patnaik to go for a quick comment, please.
Thank you, Dr. Bikram. Am I clearly audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
A
please.
very good morning and good evening. So thank you, Professor Gianluigi, for your very enlightening discussion and a very practical discussion also. Sir, you have all the way from Russia, you have tried to connect virtually and made us, all of us, understand the importance of education, the practicability of education, and how education should be free, and education as a value where all values should be sacrificed for that. So it's really very interesting, sir, to listen to a very different point of view. You began with the school education, where the justice of the US Supreme Court, where William Orville Dulles, who talked about if a parent keeps his child out of the school beyond the grade school, then the child will be forever barred from entry into the new and amazing world of diversity that we have today. So that was very interesting and very new perspective and a very innovative idea, that how education through these examples, the examples that you gave from point to point, several case studies, and how what is actually education and how education is responsible, and how autonomy is necessary. Autonomy is necessary in educational world. I think there is some disturbance in between. Yeah. So how education should be autonomous, and education being a particular aspect, how it should be followed in a very autonomous way, and it's a way of life or a need of life that one should go for. And sir, you also said about the aim of education and how civic education or not, and what are the different kinds of education, public education, private education, and what are the connections with the significances of education. So it was really great listening to you and understanding how in a liberal world, how education should be autonomous, education should be liberal, and it should be diverse, because when we are exposed to the diverse world, we can get to know a different aspect of life, and we can have our own mindset with that. So thank you so much, sir, because there are many things to say, as you have explained a lot about education, and it was really interesting and enlightening to listen to you. So thank you so much, sir, for spending your valuable time over here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nupur Patnaik, for your nice remark. Sir, this is the World Human Change and Management Conference. This is invitation to dialogue and mapping mind series. So I have few queries. I have only 5 questions for you today's night. First, sir, how you look at this particular, the private education and this public education? What do you feel personally? Hello?
I think, sir, you are muted. You are muted, sir.
Yes, excuse me.
Please,
No,
please.
yes. Do you mean what I think about the problem that is, which is my position? Well, I intentionally did not want to say which is my position, because I did not want to influence you, because I am aware that the position of Galston on the one hand and the position of Anderson Shapiro, for instance, or Wim Gutman on the other hand, are very different from each other. And I preferred to give you space for forming your own opinion and to confront the different opinions. If I am, of course, requested, asked for a statement and position, I say that generally I am for Arneson and Shapiro. Yes, I am for civic education and for the education to autonomy in general, and for the duty of the state to promote this kind of education in order that we can have in society mature citizens. That is, it is essential to have from the childhood a preparation of civic education in order to have then to become then from children mature citizens which are able to actively participate in the society. And this means that they have been endowed with the right orientation, that is with cultural materials in order to be able to have an opinion and to form one opinion day after day. That is, of course, politics is also a form of disposition of mind and openness of mind in order to be able to have an orientation, to gain an orientation also in the future. That is, to be prepared to have always new orientations in the public life. Yes, if I am requested for a position, I agree with Ernest and Shapiro and with their way of interpreting education, public life, the importance of the participation in public life, and with their general ideal of civic republicanism, that is, that the individual has a right and perhaps also a duty to participate in public life. That is, that the individual may not separate herself from the society, and that in general the absence of the capacity to participate in public life is a strong deprivation of rights of the individuals. That is, I side with Emerson and Shapiro, in spite of the fact that I consider, acknowledge, recognize that William Galston can have strong arguments that is to his favor, that is he deserves being considered with great attention, with careful study, because he has also strong fundaments and grounds for his way of thinking. But I side decidedly with Anderson and Shapiro with their mentality for the civic education. Yes.
Thank you so much, sir. I partially agree with your answer, but not fully, and I disagree with your statement also. Thank you so much. And second question for you, sir, if I believe my former president's quote, if you believe education is the machinery of job creation, then you will only create servants. That is my former president, Dr. APJ Bharat Ratna APJ Abdul Kalam's statement. He was given in a public domain. Sir, what you look when you are just try to, mapping your ideas, education is meant for society and public life, then how you look particular the sense of liberalization in a particular way of life and education meant for society? Because many people are going to get education to get a job. Do you believe the knowledge industry or the knowledge protocol allow us to do all these things? What is your answer, sir?
Yes, another very important question, of course, very important. Thank you very much for asking it. Yes, it's true. It's true. This is another problem of education, which is common also to Western Europe, I would say. That is, whereas in the school system of some years ago, perhaps also in the school system in which I studied, there was, of course, an attention for the job finding, but there was also an attention for the general formation of the individuals. That is, it was not only job oriented. The school system tried to give also a civic formation to individuals. It is true that, on the other hand, in the last 30 years in Europe, I speak of Europe, of course, in this moment, because it is the environment which I know best, there has been the tendency to orientate the education, the formation of individuals only to the finding of the job. That is, only the school system has become in Western Europe more and more sectorial, without an opening, a space of opening the mind for the general problem of society. I think this is a problem. There is a lack, far too limited policy strategy of formation of education of individuals, and I do not think that this, at the end of the day, facilitate the orientation of the individuals in the life, because in the life and also in job finding, because it is too far oriented to the needs of the moment in the society. And of course, society developed themselves, and therefore many times I've seen that so sectorial education do not help can help in immediately to find a job, but does not help in the life and also in the work life, when a person, for instance, should change the job which she has found. But it is true that is, at least in Western Europe, there is nearly an absence of this ideal of civic education, which is proposed by Anderson and Shapiro. It was not always so. No, up to 30 years ago, it was not so. But now the tendency is this. I do not agree, frankly speaking, with this sectoriality and limitation of perspective of the individuals. I think we cannot lose the sense of the civic education and of the interpretation of the society, because these are instruments which remains in the mind and help also in the work life. But you
Thank
are
you, sir.
right. It is a
Yeah.
problem. It is a problem. It is a point. Yes, it is a point.
Thank you so much, sir, for your kind answer. This is the third question for you, sir. You are representing Europe, rightly mentioned. You talked about your answer, and you are sitting over there. The first, you are representing the Europe, not only Europe. You are sitting in the first world, right, sir? And I
Yes.
am sitting in the third world when I am representing India. Is a poor country. And what the big players is concerned, when this UNICEF, UNESCO, and these all faithful watchdogs, those are keeping all values, how they are doing all these things in terms of the differences between North and South, the differences between East and West, the differences between first world and third world, and the differences between the world and post world war. And then even you are rightly you are sitting in particular the Russian side, and we all should watch how differences in particular a world when we are living. How education taught us. Education taught us we go to do fight each other. Education taught us we go for the violence. Education taught us for the post-war independence. And what kind of world we are living in, sir? And what education, the moral values taught us? What is your answer, sir?
Yes, another very important question, of course. I think that at least in certain systems, and yeah, I am speaking also the US system of education, there has been a strong change with the affirmation of neoliberalism, because neoliberalism has produced not only in the US, in Canada, but also, of course, in the UK and in the Western Europe, this mentality of individualization and of the scholars, of the pupils, and of the individuals, and this kind of seeing the society as composed of atoms, of individuals as atoms, which are tendentially one against the others, and are not collaborating with each other. So it is a mentality which has been affirmed through the neoliberalism policy. And from the 80s, I would say, from the late 70s of the past centuries and through the 80s, and then so on and so forth, and which has underlined and backed up a model of school and generally a model of society in which individuals are atoms, are not community, are not collaborating with each other. And this model, of course, has produced then societies in which the individuals do not see any longer the ties with each other, but rather are educated to be in conflict, to be in competition with each other. I think was not always so, but this model of schools and in general of society has been affirmed through the neoliberalism and has produced this kind of society in which we tendentially sees the other individuals as potential competitors, not as collaborators, but as competitors. And it is common to many countries. That is, it is not only a problem of US, of Canada, of Australia, but it is widely diffused in every country of Europe or Western Europe, and I think also of Eastern Europe. But I think it is this mentality which has produced, of course, modification in the society and in the interrelations between individuals, has been affirmed by and through the victory of neoliberalism. Yes, there are those who have spoken of the affirmation of a model of individuals which are psychopathic. Perhaps it's far too strong, this judgment, but anyway, it is an interpretation of neoliberalism in which it is said that neoliberalism wanted to see individual as affected by a psychopathia in which individuals only thinks to themselves, only consider the other ones as competitors, and do not see any value in the collaboration of between the individuals, whereas in truth we are also collaborative individuals. That is, we are not only competitors with each other, but we collaborate with each other. But this aspect of collaboration and the value of collaboration and the value of socialization, to be social, that is not to be competitors, but to be socialize with the other people, is something which has been excluded by neoliberalism. Well, we have, of course, the famous sentence of Margaret Thatcher, who said, "The society does not exist; only individuals exist." And this is a manifesto. Is a manifesto for this mentality. That is, there are all individuals that are competitors, atoms, and there is no society. That is, collaboration has no sense in this kind of way of living. And this is the problem. I think it is something which has affirmed itself from the late 70s and from the 80s of the past century. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Sir, my fourth question for you, sir, today's night. Sir, when you comparison this particular Western education and the Asian education system, we are lag behind of your so beautifully infrastructured and so structured and so intelligent we are built up this particular institution. Those are hosting called Cambridge, Oxford, and if you looked at the particular USA, MIT, Harvard, and many more institutions, even Pennsylvania also. Sir, do you know in India, a student moral, when he tried to get his primary education, he spent only 400 to 500 rupees in 5 years. Then 6 to 10, he spent only 1,000 to 2,000 rupees to get his upper school level education. Then immediately undergraduate level or intermediate level, he spent only 5 to 10,000. This is the moral structure and educational system of India. When we look particular the westernization of education, it's one of the most influensive and very difficult to get proper education, in particular the standard of Western educations, because the Westernization education is so vibrant, so popular. And in submission, I would also like to add, when people are thinking about all these universities, sir, one professor is a very nice speaker and very nice leader for 1 hour or 60 minutes. Sir, what is his macro framework for rest of his life? A professor came from Oxford, Harvard, or MIT, or even other very crucial and very Stanford and very Southampton and very other Pittsburgh and Vienna like yours. Everybody, those are talking even the moral education system. They taught in their universities. But in post-pandemic life world, their taught material should be online. And why not should be online, in particular those poor students? Those are very talented, but they are living in the rural pockets of rest part of the world. What kind of moral ethics for them, sir? Your suggestion, sir.
Yes, I thank you very much. This also is a very important, very interesting question. And I think it is partially related to what I have been saying before. That is, the problem is that education, the system of schools, also through this influence and this affirmation of neoliberalism, has been seen as something in which institutions compete with each other. That is, they are in competition, not in collaboration. And therefore, the rich universities and the rich institutions have become always richer and richer, and the other institutions have become less valued. Although many times the institutions which are not so considered are very good indeed, but they are not considered because they do not belong to the, for instance, to the Ivy League, or to this hierarchical elite formed system of education. I think that the problem is also here, that is, since the objective is to produce and to produce competitors, the intent, the aim, and the impulse to collaboration between institutions, and for instance, between the higher institution and the lower institution, is not given. On the contrary, the aim is to let become the institutions which are richer always richer, and the institutions which are poorer always poorer, in order to have a hierarchical structure and a dominance of certain groups over other groups. This is the problem. It is a problem of general mentality of the society. If the individuals or the institution are considered to be competitors, then those who pay the price for this mentality are those who are in lower positions. That is the poorer students. This is the problem. I think that therefore, it is so necessary to have a public school, a public policy of the government, and unitary policy of the governments for the instruction. That is, the state should out to promote instruction, public instruction, to the students, also to the poorest ones, of course, and should not, so to speak, privatize the sphere of public instruction, because the privatization of public instruction means the transformation of the institution in competing institution, and this will always go to the disadvantage of those who are in poorest condition, in poorer conditions, or which are disadvantage of the sociality. For instance, they live in little cities, villages, and so on, to the advantage of those who are, on the contrary, in a better position. But here must change the mentality. That is, the first thing is that this way of competition at every cost should cease, and instead of it, there should be a mentality of a collaboration between schools and between institutions in order to promote the condition of those who are in poorest conditions. I think that this is another phase of the neoliberalism. Competition at every cost means that those who are in disadvantaged condition will become always more disadvantaged. I think that there is the necessity of the complete change of mentality in the society. Collaboration instead of competition. This is the first step to be done, to the advantage of those who are in the poorest condition, first of all, and then to the advantage of all the others. Yes, I would say so. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your elaborating answer. And this is my last question today's night for you, sir. I know I am troubling you, but this is my
No
last
problem.
question, sir. Sir, you rightly mentioned when you feel competition, there is behind the capital oceanic approach, right, sir? What is capital? There is competition. And the capitalistic approach always saying that you go for competition mentality because you try to jargonical and grammarly differences between the education. Sir, what do you feel? What is the role of universities as concerned? They are producing knowledge or they are distributing the education qualification certificate? Your answer, sir.
Yeah, well, this is the problem. Another problem. Thank you very much for the question. Of course, as I alluded to before, I think that the universities were so in Western Europe, at least in Western Europe, they were a center of education also for the non-universitarian environment. That is, they were, first of all, cultural centers in which culture was irradiated to all the society in a spirit of collaboration with the society and with the other universities. Now, with this mentality of competition at every cost, the university tries to close themselves, so to protect their competence, to see the others as institutions as enemies, and therefore they do not exercise any longer this potency of irradiating the out society with culture and of promoting the culture in the out society, because they want to be close to the other society in order to maintain their position of advantage. That is, there is separation and division of the university from each other in order to better compete, and from the alt society. This is the problem. I cannot recognize, at least in Western Europe, the university any longer as a center of formation of public opinion, of debate, of cultural debate, also for all those who are not studying or are no more studying, which although those who have already completed, for instance, their studies, the university are a center of competition, a very sectorial center of education, and no more a reference point, an orientation point for the whole society. This is the problem of the universities, in my opinion, now in Western Europe. Probably also not only in Western Europe. And it is, in my opinion, provoked by this mentality of competition, market economy at every cost. That is, the university should give profits, and therefore they try to find a way of giving profits as soon as possible. And they are not no more considered, thought out as a center for the enlightenment of the society. And but also, yeah, we find the mentality of competition at every cost and not of collaboration, because universities do not want to collaborate either with the other university or with the society. This is not their aim. This is not their objective. And this is a huge problem, of course, a huge problem in the Western society, for sure, a huge problem, a huge problem. Yes, I would answer in this way. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir, for your very enlightening question answer sessions. Thank you so much. And looking forward for future engagements. With this note, I would like to invite Rudran and Das to go for a final vote of thanks. Thank you, sir.
Very much.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Gianluigi, for this wonderful ideas that you share about your particular topic. and definitely our students and researchers, those are in the field of social science, are very much concerned about these political issues and in the present scenario of education and the problematic functions of education. You might you address all very specifically, and your ideas are very much impressible to the new 21st century world. Definitely, these 2 hours of the World Human Sciences and Management Conference will be very deliberately, very powerful. Definitely, from on behalf of Center for Adivasi Research and Development, I thank you for giving a wonderful and uh, exclusive time to us and our audiences. Thank you so much, Professor Gianluigi, for your wonderful time and your uh, brainstorming ideas and research uh, to share with us. Now, I would like to thank our patrons for institutional support, the Director, Indian Institute of Management, and the Vice Chancellor, University of Odisha, and a very uh, big thank to Dr. Vikram Kesari Jana, the Director of Adivasi Research and Development, who always think how to create a new horizon of uh, education in particularly in Asian countries and Southeast Asian region. And his thinking is definitely to definitely to stop this isolation of minds, in particular in our state and country like India, where education needs, as Dr. Jin asking you about the competition and the poor education system is also a matter of concern. And you're very gladly, thank you, Dr. Jena, for inviting Professor Jiang Lui to share his ideas with us. Thank you, and thank you all the participants of all the members and all our participants from Facebook and YouTube who are watching us live. And thank you everyone. Few people join here, and thank you, Professor Jian Louis, once again for your wonderful time. Thank you. The meeting is concluded now. Thank you.